So it's my pleasure to introduce Maarten Dalmijn. And just a few things to share about Maarten's background, why we've asked him to be here as an expert in product ownership, product leadership is, I mean, he's got the experience where he's introduced Scrum and scaled up product management processes at the fastest growing startup in the Netherlands, right? He's been, I love how he says he's not just built, but even rebuilt. Maybe he'll share with us what that means. But 5 products with varying success, right? So here's somebody who knows the great and the not so great. He's a writer, and many of you probably follow him on Medium or LinkedIn. He's published 180 Medium articles on agile and product management topics, has 62,000 followers. So you're amongst those. He's currently writing a book on sprint goals, which I understand is something he's talked about for a long time.
Yeah.
And that book will actually be part of the Mike Cohn series with Addison Wesley. So, which anything Mike Cohn puts his signature on is pretty good. And currently he's the head of product at Rodeo, still in the trenches, as it were. So without any further ado, what we're going to do, the way this Ask Me Anything session will go, is Maarten has a brief presentation, just a topic he will seed us with. I'll let him introduce that for about 15 minutes, and then we will open it up to any questions about that topic or any others that you've brought. Sound good, Maarten?
Sounds amazing. So
welcome. Thank you very much for being here. Let me turn over the screen share to you.
Yeah, I will share my screen. Does everybody see my screen? Yeah, I assume so.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk about something which is really dear to me, and I think it's very pragmatic. Like people that follow me, they hopefully know that I'm someone that just not writes about the theory, but how you do stuff. And by the end of this presentation, you will know what is the North Star framework and how can it help me deliver more value at your current job. So I was browsing LinkedIn yesterday night, which I often do, and I was just kind of putting the finishing touches on this presentation, and I was just kind of Googling what are people writing, and it kind of made me sad. Like, people write stuff like, forget the output, focus on the outcome instead. Outputs versus outcomes, like they're a juxtaposition, like they're opposing things. Or writing like outcomes are the only thing that matter. And I believe these people are missing the point, and I hope by the end of the presentation you will agree with this statement. So let's start with some simple definitions. So an output is everything we make, let's say a feature, and an outcome as defined by Joshua Seiden is a change in customer behavior that drives business results. So the important thing to take away here is an output can lead to an outcome, but it's doesn't necessarily have to be that way. And here are some really nice quotes that show this difference, like quotes that really resonated with me. So this is from Katie Sierra, like, upgrade your user, not your product. Don't build better cameras, build better photographers. So the better cameras are the output, the better photographer is the outcome. And this is from Charles Revlon, who we're all familiar with Revlon, I assume. He said, in the factory, we make cosmetics. In the store, we sell hope. So the person that goes to their job interview, trying to look like their best selves to increase the chances of getting hired. And how I phrase it is, like, the effort in your product only matters to the extent that it makes a difference to your customer. It makes a difference to them. And yeah, as you can see with the colors, you can see this juxtaposition between outputs and outcomes. But what customers really want is customers want progress. And here's another very famous quote you've probably seen before. People don't buy a quarter-inch drill. They want a quarter-inch hole. And this is from Professor Levitt. And actually, this quote is a lie. People don't want a quarter-inch hole. So let me give you an example from my personal experience. I have a 3-year-old daughter, and she loves reading books. And I wanted to install a lovely bookcase so that she could grab her own books. And I really, really didn't want to drill a hole, because it means grabbing a concrete drill. It means that I need to have the right drill bits. It means I need to make a mess. I need to clean it up. I don't want it. I don't want a quarter-inch hole. What I actually want is like this sense of accomplishment. When I put this shelf there, it looks amazing. Like when I have this feeling of calmness, like I see my little girl, like all the books organized, and her room looks really clean. And then this feeling of happiness, that she walks over there, grabs the book she likes because it's the right height. So that's what I actually want. And if I can achieve that without a hole, amazing. I really don't want to make a hole. And you hear a lot about these outcomes over outputs or outcomes versus outputs. And what is really important to keep in mind, it does not mean that the outputs do not matter. And it also doesn't mean that the two are opposing things that work against each other. So let me give an everyday example. Like imagine you want to lose weight. So you want to lose 20 pounds. So on the left-hand side, there's some stuff you can do, some changes in your behavior. And let's say I start eating an apple per day, or I walk 12 miles every day, or I stop drinking alcohol. Like not everything will help me achieve this impact of losing 20 pounds. So actually, probably, right? I mean, I didn't do the experiment. If I walk 12 miles every day, that's probably going to make a big impact. And that's an example of like an output that is an outcome, because it leads to the result we're looking for. And what's also really important to keep in mind, it's lagging. Like if I start walking today 12 miles, I will not see the impact. Tomorrow, I will also not see the impact. It takes a long time and you need to keep at it. And this is the same in product development. So the easy part is actually know that you want to lose the 20 pounds. We know we want to make $1 million, or we want to grow the ARR, but figuring out the kinds of behaviors that produce that results, that allows us to deliver more customer value or capture more business value, that's the difficult part. How do you do that? And that's actually where the North Star framework can really help. So what is the North Star? It's actually a single metric that captures both customer value and business value. So this is really important to understand. It captures both. And you can have customer value and no business value. You can also have customer, so you need to capture that business value. There needs to be this transaction. So in the case of Spotify, a good North Star could be time spent listening to music. Because basically, imagine they implement something like better recommendations. It means I will get better music, I will get more value, but actually Spotify, they will need to pay more royalties, there will be higher costs. But if, as a result of better recommendations, more people get a Spotify account because they hear the recommendations are awesome, then it leads to more business value. So it's really important that you keep an eye on these both sides of the coin. And what I find is very often companies talk about the money, all about the money. But if you're not delivering that customer value, you cannot capture that business value. So what's really nice about the North Star framework, you might be thinking, yeah, one metric, never going to work. Well, then the nice thing about it is that you need to define a constellation of inputs that you believe influence the North Star. So here are some examples. For example, bringing users back more often. So let's say you have notifications or better recommendations. It's probably a reasonable hypothesis that they'll come back more often. And when they're back, some subset will listen to music. So it's a pretty reasonable assumption. But the beauty is, because you built this model, you can actually evaluate it, you can grow it, and you can develop a working model for how your product delivers value. So the way I see it, this constellation of inputs is a huge hypothesis tree. And it's really important that you, if you want to start the North Star framework, that you make this hypothesis tree and you start simple, because the more assumptions we make, they will turn out to be wrong. It's better to start simple. And then as you do the work, you learn and discover more, and then you can let it evolve. And here's a really nice picture. And this is actually from the Amplitude North Star Framework book. So it's a really good book that you can download for free. They really explain the North Star Framework far better than I can in a short amount of time. So if you are interested, I really would recommend you to read it. So the way you see it, so the work on the left-hand side, that's the product backlog. That's the stuff, the features you're building. And you have hypotheses of what they're going to influence. And then you can check, do they impact the North Star metric? And the big assumption there is that the North Star metric says something about business results, customer value. And the key thing to understand from this picture is on the left-hand side, you see the leading indicators, because you can check whether you developed a feature. You can check whether it influences this input. But this business value takes a long time. And that's not something you're going to do in a single day or in a single week. It needs to be over a longer period of time. And let me give an example where this often goes wrong, right? Because if you believe like, hey, this is a reasonable assumption, like value is lagging, it takes time to manifest. If you look at how most people and most companies do sprint reviews, they all focus on outputs. They all focus on talking about the feature. What did we deliver? How did it work? And we don't talk about like what metrics did it influence. And what we also don't do is we don't revisit what we delivered a few sprints ago, even though logic would dictate you should, because it's lagging. It takes time. Like there was a cohort of users that started using it. How are they doing? Are they getting value out of it? And unless you start measuring these lagging responses, then it becomes very difficult to control your outcomes. Just like it becomes very difficult to lose weight, like if you don't focus on measuring those lagging outcomes as well. So in conclusion, it's not outputs versus outcomes, it's outputs and outcomes. The outputs are what drive the outcomes, but not all outputs drive outcomes. The North Star framework is a really easy way to start. Like it's easy to understand, and you can build a model for how your product delivers value. And then start with something simple. We're doing Scrum. We're all familiar with empiricism. Let it evolve over time. And yeah, I promised to do it in less than 50 minutes, and I believe I did. So thank you for your time.
All right, Maarten, thank you. Now, let's open it up to questions about what Maarten just talked about.
Hi, yeah. I actually wanted to know, it sounds really simple, right?
Yeah.
Align our business and our customer goals. Wow, that should be really easy to do. I'm thinking that's going to be, I mean, in a Spotify model, that made sense. And I probably could come to that fairly quickly. But I think that I work in healthcare IT,
Yeah.
and I'm going like, it's not always going to be so simple.
Oh yeah, no,
So,
absolutely.
no. So I'm wondering how, the process that you utilize in this North Star model to determine, where those overlap, kind of where those align, and so you find the value in both business and user.
Yeah. So basically what's really important is customers, they're using your product to achieve certain goals. So you need to understand those goals. And then when you understand those goals, you can track the actions that lead to those goals. And that's something you can track. That's one part of the equation. Then the business value, right? That depends on your business model. Like if it's subscription based, then it's about like, hey, do people upgrade more, or are there more subscribers? And that's what makes it exactly so difficult. So there are cases where it's simple as well, right? Like, so let me give you an example where it's, in my opinion, simple. So I worked at an e-commerce company, and they were missing a payment method in the Danish market. And they were a Danish company, and it was actually their most popular payment method. Adding that payment method is guaranteed money. Like it's very clear that the customer will have value, because it's kind of like in the Netherlands, we have Ideal. What's the most popular? I don't know what's the most popular. Like they didn't have Ideal, and I don't know what's in the US, what's the most popular. So if you would add that, that would be massively convenient, and it results in business money. But those are the easy cases. Like, so to get back to your concrete question, right? So I think a really good way of looking at it is looking at your customers that churn, like, or your customers that do not get value out of your product, because you can get a lot of information from that. Because if you have a North Star that is really doing great for customers that churn, probably it's not a great North Star. But what I can suspect, for example, in the Spotify example, and I also did at my current job, like by looking at the customers that churn, that leave, that don't get value out of your products, you can really validate like, hey, these are customers that are doing great. So what is their North Star like? And these are customers that are doing terrible. And that's a really good way to make a first model for your North Star.
We did have a question come in through the chat. This is from Kelly.
Yeah.
Can you speed up the lagging indicators? For instance, can you lose weight quicker? But yeah, can you speed up the lagging indicators?
Yeah, you can definitely can. Like, but the key thing is there is delay, and sometimes it's bigger, right? And as well, like, how can I say? It's kind of like if you stand on the weighing scale every day, there's going to be some variance, right? There's going to be, so it's not that easy to just immediately see differences. It takes a bit of time. And of course, you can do A/B testing and all these kind of things, but very often you don't have sufficient users to do that. Like, then you need to run a test for 3 months or something. Like, it also depends on the number of users. But yes, you can lose weight quicker. But the key thing is you need to discover that this input is driving this outcome. And yeah, and then if you do it more, the assumption is it will make you lose weight faster. But that's also something you can check.
I'd like to hear more about your work with sprint goals and how that might be able, how teams can use that to help drive those value conversations, those output conversations, those impact conversations, so that, like, I mean, I know in theory, like, your sprinkle iteratively will help you guys focus on delivering kind of just like the overall business on the business strategy that you're trying to do. But I'd like to hear more about like your thoughts on that.
Sure. So it's a topic probably where I'm gonna speak a lot. So I'm sorry, but I hope it will be useful. So the reason why we use sprint goals is because our plans will fail, our actions will be imperfect, and even if we execute the plans perfectly or do everything as expected, it will not lead to the desired results. And this is kind of the nature of complex work we cannot predict. So the military, like a few hundred years ago, they solved this problem. Like the German army, it's called Auftragstaktik, or I think it's called mission command or something in English. So what they actually said is, in every mission that we do, there needs to be an objective. Like for D-Day, for example, it was to advance inland and secure key junctions. So it contained two things. Like what we want to achieve is we want to advance inland, and how we do that is by securing these key junctions that will allow us to advance inland. And the main thing that you do by having that, so they call it the commander's intent, then everybody in the Empower team knows this is what we're trying to achieve. This is what our plan is for. And then when the plans turn out to be like the situation changes, or people do something wrong, or the opponent does something that we don't expect, then we can adjust because we know the intent of what we're trying to achieve. So that's one part, right? Like if you don't know what you're trying to achieve, then the plan is the goal, and then you cannot adjust it. So that's, I think, one of the main things. If you have an empowered team, you want to have short feedback loops, like because we know, like if you do something like waterfall, you have long feedback loops because the plans, they go through all these different silos, so to speak. So sprint goals really help with that. Like, and what is really important is you need to have this connection between the output, what you're doing, and what you're trying to achieve. And when you have those things, that means, so I can give you an example, right? Like what I try to do is set a sprint goal for the team. And then if they come during the sprint with questions, that for me is a sign like, hey, why are they coming with questions? Is the intent not clear? Do they don't have sufficient context? Like, I don't know. Did I tackle everything you wanted to know? Like, are there some topics that are missing? Like, I can talk more.
Yeah, can we explore more about when a product owner is caught with, like, they might have an idea of what needs to happen, but there's like chaos happening in their leadership above them, where like things are shifting on the product manager, and then therefore it kind of trickles down. Can you use sprinkles to guard against that? What would your advice on that be? So
here's so I'm going to answer that with no, because I believe, so there are a lot of teams actually that work with the idea that sprints are fixed, right? Like you add 10 backlog items and you promise to deliver those 10 things. So I actually think that's a stakeholder management problem. Like I think many product owners really underestimate like how difficult it is. What makes it really difficult is, so things we take for granted, right? Like, what does it mean, complex work? What does it mean that we that we cannot predict exactly what will be successful? We cannot make perfect plans. Like, we take that for granted. But I can tell you one thing, a lot of those people in the C-level, they're just thinking, and I'm talking to these people, they're just thinking, when these people don't deliver on time, they're incompetent. They don't know what they're doing. And these beliefs, like this is one of the beliefs. Another belief is to build this feature, then we're going to have value. That's another belief. If you believe that, then the whole discussion becomes build these features, get them out of the door, and life is great. So I think it's really like stakeholder management and tackling these beliefs head on. And if you don't do that, so I will say like the roadmap is the area where we will see these problems. So if you're ever having a job interview, ask to see the roadmap. Because I've interviewed at companies and they say, yeah, we're completely agile. And then you look at their roadmap and you see a Gantt chart for 9 months, like every feature planned in advance, all the dependencies mapped. Yeah, that doesn't leave room for emergence or adaptation if the teams have to deliver by that time. What that usually happens is the first thing on the roadmap is delayed, then the whole roadmap is delayed, and 9 months, everybody's miserable. That's what I see, actually. So I hope that makes sense. So I don't think sprint goals solve the problem, because you will say to the stakeholder, you cannot do that. We have a sprint goal, and they'll just think, boy, are you annoying? You know what I mean? Probably.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, now that you say that it's a stakeholder management problem, I totally see what you're meaning, and it's tackling the root of it, the belief system that's driving the behaviors that you're seeing, and then also like the impact of the behaviors on the rest of the team and stuff like that, and the org. And thank you for that.
So there, I just will give you what I would do, right? Like, so I think one of the challenges is, actually, you should build a relationship with your stakeholders before you need them. You should sit with them, understand their world, care about their world. Because if you care about their world, they will care about your world. They will listen to you. What I very often see is that when there are problems, then we start talking to them. And that's the wrong approach, because there's immediately this friction, this conflict, and then it becomes really difficult to bridge this difference in understanding, because something needs to happen, and that needs to happen quickly. Two things I would like to say, like what I use to influence stakeholders or to explain them. Like, I use the weatherman example. Everybody knows, like, we listen to the weatherman every day, or the weatherwoman, and they are wrong. Like, they're more than 2 weeks in advance, they're going to be wrong. But we don't think they're incompetent. We realize, like, that they're using the information that they have, which is not perfect, to make the best prediction they can. And that's a really good example of like what I believe software development is like. And the other thing is, when you talk about prioritization, right? Like, you always have this roadmap with 100 goals. You can do that, but you don't have control when you do that. So I always sell it as control. So yeah, we can have 20 goals, but that means that we're going to work on 20 things, and you will not have control of what gets delivered first. So do you want that? And we will also be slower. So focus on less. We'll have more control. We have control of what gets delivered first. It's not going to be that something less valuable gets delivered, right? So that's how I try to frame it. Like, if you don't do that, yeah, we're going to make a lot of progress, but we won't have control.
Getting back to that North Star, and I love the question actually that came out, but was specifically pertaining to sprint goal. Now, when I thought that North Star, I thought more along the lines of, and this again, I'm getting back to business versus customer or user. So does it align more, or should it align with the, not the sprint goal, but the product goal, and or the actual overarching organizational or product vision, right? So potentially, right? So just wondering if that's maybe more of the way to look at it.
Yeah. So so the way I see it is, so you're absolutely right. Like, if you think of it, you have the product vision, which is kind of like, so if you look at it, you have the company mission, right? Like, the product vision, that's kind of like the change you're trying to enact with your product. Like, then you've got the strategy, which many people believe is a plan, but it isn't. It's kind of like, what is our biggest opportunity or biggest challenge that we're facing? How do you overcome it? So you need all those things, because if you don't know where the direction you want to head, right? You don't have a solid strategy of heading in that direction, then, and the product goal is kind of like, the way I see it is sort of sprint. Like, the way I see it is like, imagine you're walking up a winding stairs, right? You only see the first few steps, so you don't see the rest. So the sprint goal is like the steps that you see at the moment. The product goal is a bit further away. And so this is how I see it. Like, the sprint goal is really like in the moment in the sprint, and the product goal is on a little bit larger time scale. And then the product vision are on a much larger time scale. I hope this makes sense.
So just to piggyback off that, so I'm still trying to just, maybe there isn't a complete alignment here, or maybe it's completely something off track and I should be considering it differently. But the way that I'm thinking about the model in which you are describing is that it would be a way to align all of these things. So if you ask somebody, for instance, from developer to product to leadership, and we say, you know, what are we developing? What are we trying to accomplish? That we would be getting a very similar answer across the board. But okay, very good. So it's deeper. I think I'm understanding. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a couple more questions that came in through the chat. Then we have a hand raised that we'll go to. One is from Crystal. Should research figuring it out, etc.
Yeah.
Be added to the sprint?
So I'm going to give a bit of a controversial answer here, right? So, I mean, I believe it will be controversial. So there are some Scrum people that believe like lean UX, you can do everything in a sprint. I'm not one of those people. Like I can tell you, I work at a startup, just calling customers to sit with me, to talk to me. Like it can take weeks sometimes, it can take a long time before they have time. So I do believe you need to have some kind of multiple tracks going on and some kind of parallelization. I don't believe that it's really possible to say, hey, we're going to do discovery and delivery and validation in one sprint. Like the validation is lagging, first of all. The discovery can take a long time. So I'm not a proponent of saying, hey, let's do everything in one sprint, because I can already say that if teams just focus on delivery, they're already going to struggle. So I think the most important thing is you should deliver stuff, right? But you should not work at a pace where everybody's focused on delivering. There needs to be time to talk to customers. There needs to be time to sit with the UX designer. Like we want to have empowered teams. So there are a lot of disagreements in the agile and product management world, but what there's no disagreement on is the importance of empowered teams. So I think it's really important that we empower teams. And I don't believe that you can have everyone working on one thing, doing discovery, delivery, validation in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks. It really depends on what you're doing. It's really context dependent. So yes, it should be added to the sprint, but I don't believe in doing all these 3 steps in one sprint.
This next one comes from Nicholas. How would you manage egos of people who rose to the C-level? After all, they rose there because they know what to do. So chances are they think they know best. Usually they don't take advice, but insist on giving it.
Yeah. I think, so I can tell you one thing, right? And you probably already have noticed by the way I speak, by nature, I'm not a political person, but I do think interacting with these C-level people requires a lot of influencing skills, a lot of politics. And that's how I've learned to deal with them, right? You try to get to know them. You try to understand what makes them tick. What do they care about? There isn't a single answer. I can give you an example, right? A concrete example. So I joined a new company. I was in my probation period, and we're working on a project which was going to be an absolute nightmare. It would never bring in money. And I was confident, but I was literally 2 weeks in, right? So everybody would look at me and be like, this is the new guy. What does he know? So I actually, what I did, I talked to the CEO, right? And he exploded because I kind of said, hey, you're asking me to research this. Could you let me know, if I think this is not viable or valuable, and I tell you we should pull the plug, is that an option? And no, it was not an option. Boom, volcano exploding, anger. So I realized, okay, so I'm not going to win this argument. He's going to be very high in emotions. So what I actually did is I talked to someone from sales who had a really good relationship, who had a report, and I actually showed him why I believed it was not going to be valuable. And I had a really good connection with this person. I said, look, if I build this, you need to sell it. You're not going to be able to sell it. You're not going to make money. You're going to have a lot of frustrations. Do you agree with that? Yes. I said, well, could you please show this to CEO? Show him what you think about it. So he did that. And because he had report, a credibility and a relationship, which I did not have, the whole initiative was killed a week later. And he was actually super happy about it. So this is political, and influencing stuff. And I'm not a master at it by any means. But you need to understand these kind of things, what will work in your situation. And that comes with experience, failing. And one thing that makes it challenging, all these leaders go to management training, soft skills training. They're dealing with other people that are very good at influencing and manipulating and politics. So very often you're outnumbered, outgunned, right? It's not going to be easy. That's the unfortunate reality. And if you look at many Scrum Masters and Agile coaches, some organizations, they really focus on this stuff. They let them go to the same kind of leadership or soft skills or influencing training or feedback training, but in many organizations, they don't. So then it's even more difficult. I do think training helps a lot.
I have a couple of questions. We talked about sprint goal and product goal, right? So we have something which is long-term, which is product goal, and sprint goal we execute. We have feedback loops, whatever the sprint duration is, and I believe how we are progressing with sprint on sprint basis, that will also feed to the product goal, right? For our long-term vision. How about release, or I will use the safe terminology, please excuse me, PI goals?
Yeah.
How about those? How they fit in? Do you think they can help? They are valuable? What are your thoughts?
I think
and then I have
sorry.
two more questions. Sorry. Yeah, please go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, so what I can say is what I really prefer doing, and I understand that in a safe context, this is probably not going to happen, but whenever it's done, you put it live in production, you start gathering data. Like that's what you should be doing, because basically the only way to get accurate feedback is to really have people using it, seeing how they use it. Like that's the how do you say the proof of the pudding is in the eating, right? So yeah, anything that delays that, right, and which might be a necessity, right, due to the structure that you're working in these release trains, I'm not a big fan. But the reality is, if you're working in a certain context where they have a certain structure, you're not going to change that overnight, right? But I would really push for working in a way where you don't delay releases, because how can I say, the speed of learning is really important because we're doing complex work, and the speed of learning doesn't only apply to delivery. The biggest uncertainty is value uncertainty. Like that's the biggest uncertainty. And yeah, so the sooner you put something live, like the sooner you can really see, like, yeah, how is it really doing? I hope this provides some more context.
Thanks. Yeah. So yeah, when we call release goal, so we don't release on the boundary of releases or PIs. We have continuous deliveries, and we have the mechanism to sense the feedback from our production releases as well. Yeah, thank you for that. Next question. From the agile Scrum team's perspective, what is important to measure, business value or customers value?
So let me tell you a story. Sorry, go ahead.
And
sorry.
How we do it in a simpler form.
Yeah. So if you're delivering customer value, you can capture the business value, right? But if you're not delivering customer value, then what you're doing is not really going to be sustainable. A good example is the pet rock, right? Like it was a fad, I think, in the 70s. Like was this rock, and they had this booklet saying it's like you don't need to feed it, and it was really funny, but it was kind of like a gimmick. Like there was not really lasting customer value there. Like all it was a story. So yeah, the guy made like 1 million with it, but it's not lasting business. Like so, what I think is really important is you need to be rooted in what the customer is trying to achieve. Like, does it help them to meet their goals? And then you can capture that value. An example is Facebook, right? Like when they started out, there was a lot of customer value. They had difficult with monetization, like, and then they went in this whole ad direction, and now it's kind of backfiring, right? It's a really good example where like the business value is kind of diminishing the customer value, where people like Facebook, or Meta as it's called now, it's kind of becoming like a dirty word, like you know, like ooh, watch out for your privacy, you know. So those are examples where like, yeah, you can really monetize things, but it can hurt customer value. And Facebook for me is a really good example, like where you see more and more people leaving because yeah, they make money, but people are like, what's in it for me?
Okay, what I'm understanding, sorry to elaborate on this.
No
if
problem.
we deliver customer value, business value comes along with it. So calculating customer value will be should be emphasized for an agile team.
Yes, because if you look at, so Melissa Perry has a really nice picture, right? It's like, it's called the product, I think, no, it's called the value exchange model. So basically on the left-hand side, you see this like this circle where it's the product, and basically people, a product meets their needs or solves their problems or their struggles, and then exchange, they can pay money to a business, right? Yeah, so those two things need to happen, like, because if you're not providing customer value and you're not monetizing it, yeah, like you're not going to be really making money.
No, thank you.
Two different sides.
Yep. one last question. In your next book, Sprint Goals, are you talking about stretch goals, uncommitted goals?
Yeah, so basically, I mean, what I'm trying, so one of the examples I give in my book is, so one of the challenges is, so this is the reality, right? The reality is that we always want to focus on one thing, but the reality is there's a production issue or there's this other little thing which also needs to happen. So sprint goals provide control by saying this is the one thing that matters most. Like if this takes more time, it's okay for the other things to drop. Like if we need that to meet this one most important goal, and that means they don't need to ask me like, hey, Maarten, like it takes twice as long. Like, should we drop the other things, right? No, like we agreed that already. And I think that's where it really helps. So in the way I see it, sometimes, right, like, so our estimates are usually wrong, but sometimes they're not. Like sometimes you get lucky and you actually can meet these other things. And why wouldn't you finish those other things as well? But the most important thing is these stretch goals, as I call them, should not become expenses, the main thing. So the analogy I use in my book is kind of like, imagine you're on the way home, right? And you get a phone call from your partner and he or she says, hey, we're having friends over for dinner, but I forgot to buy the meat or the tofu if you're a vegetarian. And could you please pick it up? Because otherwise we can't cook dinner, right? And the night will be a failure. And then she says, by the way, or he or she says, by the way, could you also buy some bike lights? Because tomorrow I'm going somewhere at night. So if you have some time, key thing being if you have some time. So yeah, so then you drive to the supermarket. Maybe traffic is great, maybe it isn't. But you know what the prime directive is, right? Like get the tofu. And if you have time to get the bike light, like great, get the bike light. But you're not going to arrive home with just a bike light and without the tofu, because then you completely miss the point. So that's kind of like what it helps with, to make those kind of decisions.
Yeah. So if you need to adapt due to the evolving complexity during the shorter feedback cycles, then having this will really help.
Crystal, I think, was having trouble with her audio. And so I'll read what she wrote in the chat. She asks, I'm having an issue creating sprint goals. My challenge is we have inherent a database that we are fixing and adding features. So it's sort of a piecemeal situation.
Yeah. So just to make sure I understand the question correctly. So basically the challenge is there are too many different things going on at the same time. So it's very difficult to, okay, good. So what I can say is, like, depending on your product life cycle, right, there can be the case that you're only working on adding small features and small improvements. What I usually see, right, but this also depends on your context, like the technical depth, that you enter in a more predictable situation, right? You're not making big changes. But if you have a lot of technical depth, right, then it can still be quite unpredictable. But what I always say is, like, I'm a pragmatic person, right? So if you have 10 things that need to happen, 10 small things, and there really is no overarching thing, like, don't force yourself to use something if you have to finish these 10 things. But what I can say is, I think very often you can find something they have in common. Like, for example, are we trying to improve the maintainability or the scalability, or like make it more thematic goal so that you can relate these things? And you say, this is actually from these 10 things, these 6 things are related. Those are the most important. So that's kind of how I would go about solving it or trying to solve it. But it's difficult to answer these kind of questions because there is so much context I don't have.
Yeah, and I'll just say, Maarten, as I'm listening to you, it's probably the more sprints I run that way, over time, I'll probably look back and realize I was probably pretty rudderless taking that approach every sprint, right? So although I might have to do that this sprint, but the more I do that, the more I might find myself rudderless down the road. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question on the thought leadership, like the stuff that you produce. I wanted to kind of share my opinions, but a couple of things are working against me. My own insecurities, like I've got my own like that's not an original thought. There's like 10,000 people thinking the same thing, like, you know, what, you're not anything special, that type of thing. But then also when I go and read other people's, like other thought leaders posts on LinkedIn, or like Medium articles or books, or not really books, but more like online content, like there's often like what I call like haters, right? People who aren't adding constructive criticism, that are kind of just really there to tear you down. And so I'm like, well, I don't want to deal with that either. Like I don't want to have like a whole group of haters like on my stuff commenting. And so kind of I wanted to know your approach to that. Like what drives you, what motivates you? How do you deal with your own, like, do you deal with your own personal insecurity, and how do you deal with the haters?
Yeah. Oh, this is the first time I've been asked this kind of question, and it's like, how can I say? What I can say is a few things. When I started out writing, my writing wasn't original at all. I was like, and I also believe like when you start out, just like I have kids, right? They're learning to speak, they're imitating. So when you start out, you're going to imitate, and that's cool. Like, doesn't mean you suck. Like, that's how you learn, how you grow. Like, if you're going skiing, right, you're going to do what the teacher does. Doesn't mean you don't know what you're doing. Doesn't mean that you are not good at what you do, but that's just the way you start. And then if you just stick with it, you might develop your own voice. Like, not everybody does. Like I can say, what I also can say is when I read my own articles, I don't consider them to be great or amazing. I see like the books I've read or the comparisons, it's like, it's just putting some stuff together, in all honesty, right? Like if you it's just that others maybe or didn't do this or not as like, I don't know, right? But I don't think it's that special, to be honest. Like, it's just a lot of hard work, and I like it. That's why I put in the hard work. I like writing, and yeah, it kind of took me 6 years to kind of gain some kind of traction, whatever it is. And so what I can say is the insecurity, right? I have a lot of haters. I think that's normal. So what I try to remind myself with is like, whenever you have an opinion or a perspective, people are going to hate you for it. And what I actually received a message like from 3 a.m. from a guy, 5 pages, totally demolishing me, saying I'm like complete nobody. I have no clue what I'm doing. Literally like 5 pages, like full of hate. And I just wrote him back like, what you wrote says more about you than about me. And that's honestly the way I see it. And people will hate me. People will like me. Yeah, I do what I like. And that's what I try to do. And that's what motivates me. And if there are people that like it, awesome. If there are people that don't like it, that's part of the gig. Like, especially if you take an opinion, like a perspective, and that's what I do. And yeah, part of the deal. And yeah, insecurity, like, I don't know, like I'm super nervous for talks. I hate talking. I literally don't sleep, like, but people don't see it. So it's just my issue. Like, yeah, so that's what I can say. Everybody has their insecurities, but are you going to lead with it, or are you going to like put it in the corner, like, or sweep it under the rug? It's still there, right? So, but yeah, I'm not going to let that insecurity make decisions for me.
Thank you, everybody, for these questions. Maarten, thank you for your responses, for your time, for all of this. And I don't know, is there anything you'd like to leave us with, Maarten?
The name of the book is Succeeding with Sprint Goals. And yeah, next year it will be published. If you want to have a copy, follow me on LinkedIn, Medium. I will be posting, like, there will also be a pre-order page, like somewhere next year. You have to do things that make you happy in life. Like, that's what I try to do. So there's a really great speech from the writer of Calvin and Hobbes, Bill Watterson, at Kenyon College. So I read that every now and then to remind myself what matters in life. So I can send it later, right? I'm not going to give you my words of wisdom. My words don't matter. He put it far better than me. So if you like Calvin and Hobbes, you know Bill Watterson, look up that speech, and it will remind you what matters in life. And that's doing the things that make you happy, grant you energy. And yeah, of course we need to make money, right? But life is short. So that's all I want to say.